Okay, right. So all of you have started with technology that came out of the R&D lab, and well, right? We say R&D is converting money into knowledge, right? That's what you're trying to do, right? You burn money, right? You literally burn money. Hopefully, you get some new knowledge that you didn't know before, right? That's research. And now what we are trying to look at, that assuming that you created some new knowledge, new technology, this program is about how do you convert that knowledge into money, right? How can you commercialize it? So just maybe you may say it's a straw man, but let me set up an example of how not to launch a new technology, right? Those of you who are old enough may have heard of a company called Webvan. Who have heard of Webvan? Yeah. Okay. This was at the height of the dot-com boom in the late 1990s, right? The founder is a prominent managing partner of one of the top consulting companies in the world. He left his obviously very cushy positions, and he raised close to $1 billion of venture capital money. That was at the height of the dot-com boom, to start this company with a simple value proposition. Simple, if you look at it now, to deliver grocery to your home. You order online, they deliver. Now today, this is a dime a dozen. Every city has the equivalent of this kind of service, right? In Singapore, you have this as well, yeah? But this is back in the late 1990s. So they were so confident that this would be a success that they rented 2 huge warehouses in the Bay Area and stock it up with lots of grocery inventories, and then they outfitted, I think, several dozens of these vans, nicely painted and all that, so they are all ready to go. Except that after they launched their website, what happened? Hardly anybody ordered anything. So after spending lots of capital money, build the warehouses, stock it up with inventory, build all this, pay for all these vans, sign long, I was told in fact it was 2-year leases or something on the warehouses. They realized that there's actually no business, right? So the top reason, this is a survey of a startup that was funded by venture capital. It's not just your normal startup, this is a startup that already invested in by venture capitalists who are supposed to be more savvy in assessing commercial potential of technology and so on. But still, the number one reason why they fail is because they realized that actually at the end, there's not sufficient market for what they were trying to build. Okay? So this is a sort of costly way to test if something works. Spend lots and lots of dollars only to realize that actually there's no demand for it, right? Now you may say that this is maybe startup faces challenge. There are many even big companies, big corporations. You would have thought that big corporations are much better at doing this. But here's an example where a big company, some of you may have heard of this case of Exubera, right? So the idea is that, when you take, lots of people, need to take they are diabetic, they need to take insulin, and the standard solution is injection. Well, they think, injection is very painful. So why not we come up with a device that you can inhale, no injection, right? And they were so sure that of the market demand for this product that, as you can see here, that they spend huge amount of money, and it was predicted to be a $2 billion market in a short period. And unfortunately, the market failed, and the company was forced to take a $2.8 billion charge when it wrote off the whole investment. So we are not talking about small change. This is billions of dollars that was spent only to discover when they launch it that there isn't sufficient demand. Anyone know reason why this didn't take off? It sounds like such a great idea, right? Inhaling, no pain, versus injecting, a needle into your body. Okay, I'll come back to this a little bit later. But But the point is also that these are probably things that you want to test out before you actually spend such a huge amount of money. There are several reasons why it didn't take off. I'll come back to that later. So let me go back to the case of the e-commerce, right? Because ordering grocery and having delivered to you online is an example of e-commerce that we all now is commonplace. But of course, back then, in the 1990s, the conditions are very different. Not many people have internet at home. The internet speed is not very good, and not many people have experience buying things online. And so there's a lot of uncertainties. Now, shortly after this web went, have this big bang and died, there's another company called Zappos that was started. Anyone know what Zappos do? Sells lady shoes, right? So let me contrast what Zappos did with what Webvan did, right? I just described to you what Webvan did. You know what the founder of Zappos do? He goes to the nearest lady shoes shop near his house, and he takes pictures of all the lady shoes being on sale there. Take pictures on them, put it online, including the same price that was sold on the shoe store. Put it online and then wait. Somebody click on it. So he and order. So what does he do next? He quickly rush out to that lady shoe store, buy that shoes that was ordered, pay for it, and personally deliver it to that person who ordered. And then of course he thanked the lady why he bought it, and then try to find out why. And he waited again, and after a couple of weeks, he realized that there are people who actually click. So you notice that when he started, he invested in no warehouse, no inventory. All he does is to, in fact, find the cheapest way possible, which is to take a picture of shoes that are already on display in an existing shop and just put it online and then see if there's a demand. Why? Because at that point, you are not sure whether ladies are prepared to buy shoes online. Because the concern is that nobody had done this before, and ladies may want to have a touch and feel, right? So how can you be sure that people want to buy? So he invested nothing in the logistics, nothing at all. He just invested enough to test this assumption. Will ladies be prepared to order shoes online? And to test this, you don't have to build the entire ecosystem to deliver this, which is what Webvan did. What Webvan could have done is that put up a sort of online grocery store with picture of food on sale, but don't do anything else, and then see whether people order or not. So the basic idea here is that you want to minimize the amount of cost, investment, and time into testing whether something works or not. And you identify the lowest cost way to do it. So that if it doesn't work, you just move on. You don't have to invest in all these overhead costs. Right? So the basic idea of lean is to be as low cost, as fast, and as efficient as possible to find out if an assumption about your business is true or not. And in almost all cases, the most critical assumption is, would there be a demand? Right? And this is an example of how you do it in a lean way. Right? So we get back to the core point is that there's no point to build a better mousetrap until you're really sure that there's mice out there. Okay? So do the minimum to find out if there's any mice out there first. So therefore, although we are, as scientists, we are passionate about technology, about the great new scientific breakthrough we have achieved, we need to now switch on our different gear and ask ourselves, what is it that can make money? And the answer is that if you have a business that makes money, the most important thing is that you must be able to create and keep a customer. That is the most important thing. Without a customer, there's no business. Why? Because a business requires money to turn on the light, to hire the people, to make the stuff. All this costs money. Who's going to pay for this money? Well, initially some investor may pay you, but ultimately somebody has to pay for whatever you do. And if there's nobody who is willing to pay for what you do, the business will eventually die, right? So the first thing you want to be sure is that, can I find a customer and keep that customer happy, right? So that's the first thing you need to figure out, right? That you have to have a customer. And so to have a customer, you must deliver value to the customer. Value as in the customer are willing to pay for it, pay something for it. Going back to your desalinations, customers have other solutions. I can pay for reverse osmosis, I can pay for other. Why would they want to pay for yours? And in fact, in some cases, you are even trying to tell them that throw away what you have already purchased. Get rid of them and buy a new one. That's even harder, right? But why would they want to do it? They want to do it only if you create some value for them that they did not get from their existing alternative solutions. And value, however, is not just what the customer is willing to pay, but it has to be bigger than your cost of providing it. Right? Because if your cost to provide that value to the customer is higher than what the customer is willing to pay you, what it means is that for every customer you serve, you lose money. And in the long run, you definitely cannot survive, right? So the only way you can make money is that you deliver more value to the customer, meaning customer will pay you more than your cost of providing that solution to them. Unless you achieve this, you have no business, right? So this is the thing we want to focus on. How can you create value? And that's why we talk more about value proposition, right? That you have to find a way to create value big enough that to allow you to make money after you let out all the costs you need to incur to provide it, right? So essentially, there are two ways to create value, right? One way is that you start with a known customer problem and you find a better solution. You know that customer has this problem. If you can find a better solution, customer will pay for it. We all know that cancer is a big problem. If you can find a solution to cancer, you bet billions of dollars will come to you. The problem, of course, is how to find a solution. In some cases, there may be no known solution, right? So that's the challenge, and that may perhaps have motivated many of you to do your research, is that you think you can find a better solution to a known problem. In some cases, and unfortunately that tends to be true in many R&D projects, is that you discover something and then you try and figure out, what can I do with it? Who can I use this technology to help sort of solve their problem, right? In other words, now your job is to find a customer that needs your solutions. So either way, you have to think about finding a real user problem or need that you can solve better. So here's a keyword. It's not that you can solve the problem, you can solve it better. Because you don't solve it better, they will use the existing solution. So your value proposition statement cannot be just say that I solve a customer problem, but you have to say how I solve it better. Better than some existing alternative. Yeah? Implicit in that. And the key thing here, of course, is really understanding what the customer problem is. So you have to switch gear now from your technology to try and imagine what problem the customer may have that you can actually use your technology to provide a better solution, right? So the metaphor we want you to keep in mind is contrary to a common cliche that all of you have heard, right? You all heard the thing that to be innovative, you want to think out of the box, right? All of you are encouraged to be thinking out of your box. Okay, for the purpose of this module, thinking out of the box is a bad idea. Because you can imagine all kinds of problems people will have. But how do you know whether it's actually true? Sitting in your office, you can only imagine, The only way you can find out if they really have the problem you imagine they have is go and observe, go and find out, go and talk to them, go and see what problem they have. Right? So the metaphor we want you to have for this, and hopefully you carry on to the rest of your career as an innovator, entrepreneur, is to get out of the box. Once you have a certain idea, don't think too much already. go out and discover and validate if that's really true. If it's not true, come back and rethink. Come up with another new and then go out and test again, right? So that's why we say lean launch pad is mainly get out of the building. You should spend as much time outside the building, find out where the potential problem lies, so that you have a deep understanding of this problem, so that then you can think how I can develop, tailor, customize my technology to contribute to that, solving the problem. And if that's not the right problem for you to solve, drop it, go and find another one to see whether they have the right problem for you to solve, right? Okay? So user problem is sometimes something that is not predefined. So let me give you an example, right? This is what you observe in many homes, right? A water heating tank, right? So what do you think is the problem here? Anyone? Is there a problem with this product? This is the existing solution, yeah. Right.
Are you mining a bigger space? Is it bad for decoration?
So it's very bulky. Anything else? You take out a lot of space, yes.
The user interface is all the way at the top. You can't go and change it.
Maybe the user interface is not very convenient. Okay, good, yeah.
It's expensive to run. You have to heat up a big volume of water.
Okay, you think it's expensive to run, yeah? Maybe, okay. Sorry?
The energy consumed?
You think it will consume a lot of energy, but are you aware of any solution that consume less energy? Don't know, okay, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so maybe hazardous, right? It's ugly, right? Okay, my point here is that things don't come labeled as a problem. It's you as an observer, as an innovator, as a creator who see what's the problem. And more importantly, you need to understand from the perspective of the user what could be a problem to them. Yeah. So a solution that was provided by Haier is this. Haier is one of the Chinese sort of white good appliance company. So what do you think this product trying to solve with respect to what it perceives a problem here? Right? One is that hopefully it addresses the problem of ugliness. Right? Hopefully this is less ugly. But of course, what is ugly, what is not ugly, is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So iPhone, right? Supposedly a lot of people like this phone because it's cool design and so on, right? Now you may not think so, but ultimately it's in the eyes of the user, how much they're willing to pay for it. If they're willing to pay extra, that means that there's a value in design. So therefore, one of the value could be aesthetic. Nothing to do with functionality, it could be aesthetic, right? So you need to understand from the perspective of that user what is important to them. What are they willing to pay for, right? Now, second thing, of course, here is that it addresses the space problem. This one takes out a lot of space, and this has a clever sort of design such that it double up as a shelf space. So you don't need a shelf space plus the water heater. It's help you save space, right? By doubling up as a shelf space. And of course, it may have other things, but essentially these were the two main features. Of course, the user interface is slightly better than this. But let's say that, even if you assume that it functions exactly the same as this, so that there's no greater efficiency in electricity consumption, the fact that it is less ugly, the fact that it is a more space sort of usage would be the performance dimensions that enable it to do better than existing solutions, right? Okay, so we talk about innovation. So innovation could be technological innovation, like some of you have mentioned, a clever portable power, a motor that can be fitted to almost any bicycle. It could be this special cam technology that the team from Poly talk about, right? But it could be also business model innovation. You change the way you do things, right? There's a new way to providing solutions. So I was told this. Anyone of you from Australia? No. Huh? I was told that in Australia, well, because Australia is a huge country with sparse populations, so one of the existing businesses is, of course, people buy helicopters, right? And they use helicopters to travel. And when people own helicopter, there's a business to provide repair and maintenance. You got to repair and maintain the helicopter, right? So every year or so, you got to send in your helicopter for repair and maintenance, just like you send your car in for servicing, right? So some years ago, there was this new company that came out on a new kid on the block and say, you own a helicopter, I can provide this maintenance and service for you for free. Other people charge you, I provide it to you for free. What's the catch? The catch is that if other people take, 3 days, I may take 5 days. But other people charge you, I provide for free, So this is interesting value proposition to some helicopter owner who don't need to use their helicopter every day, right? So 2 extra days, no big deal, right? What do you think they actually do with that 2 extra days? Any guess? Right. They rent it out for as a essentially tourist visit service. But of course, you have to buy the insurance to make sure that if something happened to it, they are covered and so on. So here's an example of business model innovations. The process technology to actually repair and maintain a helicopter is exactly the same. For all you know, they probably use the same guy, okay, who used to do the same service before. The only difference now is that they charge the customer differently. They don't charge the actual user of that service, but they then use the asset to then generate revenue from it to cover the cost. So you can think of many other situations where there's a change in business model. So maybe at this point I can ask you, all of you know of Uber and Grab, right? Uber, Grab, taxi. So what's the difference between Uber, Grab, and a normal taxi service that you get? What's different? The car is almost the same, right? They don't use a different type of cars.
Asset light.
Sorry?
Asset light.
Asset light. You want to explain what that means?
You don't own any of the assets. They just become the conduit, the ecosystem to match each other.
Right. So the so-called sharing economy, where the service provider don't own the asset. So instead of a taxi company, they usually own a fleet of taxi. Then they rent it out to taxi drivers. They charge the taxi driver a rental use, right? And then at the end of the day, they make money from essentially a car rental business, right? They have to own all the taxi car. They got to maintain it, right? They got to keep it sort of certified and so on. Yeah. Okay. So we will, in the course of this program, have you to think through not just whether what you're doing involves a technological innovation, as in you bring a totally new technology, but also possibly maybe new business model. Sometimes it's a combination of both. And typically, new business model innovation may draw on some new enabling technology. You need not create the technology yourself, but there may be some new enabling technology that allow you to do things differently, and therefore, hopefully, you can disrupt the existing guy who are so used to the existing technology, so used to the existing way of doing things. They have not thought of using this new enabling technology. If you think about it, existing taxi company could easily have implemented the same mobile app, right? The ride-hailing app. They can easily have implemented dynamic pricing, because one of the the thing about this, right, Uber and Grab is dynamic pricing. That means that depending on peak hour or whatever, they can adjust the price. There's really, in a sense, no technological barrier for an existing taxi company to have introduced this ride-hailing apps. I mean, practically any competent computer science graduate, you can hire a bunch of them and they could write the same app, right? So the barrier is not the technology, the barrier is that why is it that existing companies have not thought of adopting this? Because it disrupts their current way of businesses, because they have invested so much in their current proprietary metering technology and so on. So maybe that could be a reason why they have not adopted, right? So business model innovations sometimes is of this nature. The technology may not be your own, but you are the first to identify the use of this to enable a new business model, right? So this is something that I will also encourage you to think about, because very often the introduction of a new technology may require a change in the business model as well. Because existing model may not be the efficient way for you to actually do, to provide your technology service. So in that case, you almost have to introduce a new business model innovation in order to enable your technology to be able to be delivered well. How can Uber protect itself from other competitors? Well, I guess you know the answer is that they can't, right? They can't in the sense that, I mean, Grab, Gojek, everywhere people are doing it. So we will later talk a bit about, in such cases, how do you sustain your competitive advantage? We will talk a bit more about that, yeah, in the subsequent sessions when we talk about market competitive analysis. Because one of the key issues about competitive analysis is not just that your technology do better than others. Remember, I keep pushing you all at the beginning, right? But the next thing is that even after you establish, like you say, your technology do better than others, how do you prevent others from imitating you? If there's no way you can stop other people from imitating you, then it's tougher. You have to find some other ways to sustain it. Yeah, we'll talk a bit about that later. Yeah. Okay, so at this point, I want you to think hard about the concept of customer. Is the user always your customer? Anyone? Who say no? Okay.
Your user could be someone working at a desk, and the buyer might be the company itself.
Okay. Right. So one of the big challenge you will need to think through is that we all talk about creating value for the user, help the user solve problem, but sometimes the user may not be able to pay you. And so you need to figure out, can I find some other people who can pay for this? So for example, what is a children's toy? Who is the user? Well, by definition, children, right? Who is the customer? Well, customer is defined as those who pay. Okay, that's the difference. User is the one who use, customer is the one who pay. Yeah. So obviously, children don't have money to pay. Well, maybe some have. Yeah. Now we have a lot of very indulgent parents. Yeah. So some of you say customer is the parent, but actually, I believe in many cases it's not the parent; it's the grandparent. Yeah. So it makes a difference, because if you know which is your customer, you target your message differently, right? So, and now you also understand why the product are being positioned like this, because when you want the parent to sell, what is the thing to get parent to sell? You position it as it's an educational toy, right? Because parents are obsessed with the idea that we want our children to spend their time productively. We don't want them to waste their time. So you now have to figure out that I need to make this toy interesting so the kid wants to use it, but I also need to be able to convince the parent that it's educational. If I have one and not the other, it won't work. If I only educational, I satisfy the parent, then the child will find it so boring, right? Most stuff that parents think are educational are actually very boring to the kids. So the kid won't use, and the kid won't use, parent won't buy. Yeah? So now you realize that I have a user and a customer, so I must come up with a product, a service, whose value proposition is not to just one, but to both. I have to satisfy the user, I have to satisfy the customer, right? In the healthcare, and we have several of you are in the biomedical, you know that one of the key challenges here is that very often, let's say you come up with a new procedure, new solution that will be useful to the patients, but very often patients don't pay. Who pays? Insurance company. So now you have to figure out what is it that will make an insurance company be willing to pay for this. So we go back to the Exubera case I told you. One of the problems they had was that of convincing the insurance company to actually pay for this inhaler as opposed to the injection. Yeah? So unless you find the customer willing to pay, even if your product is useful, it won't work. Yeah? It could be that the procedure, the nurses will love it. But if the hospital administrator say, no, we're not going to spend this money, you still won't have a business because you won't have a customer because the nurses don't pay. It's not the nurses who pay for, things, yeah? Right, so you'll be spending time to figure out not just so-called your customer segment, but also your user segment if they are not the same. So when you went out to do the interview, it's very important that you establish both that there is a user who wants to use your technology, but also there's a customer who wants to pay for it. And especially if they are not the same, you have to do a lot of searching. Yeah? Right, so the key thing we want you to go out to do is to come up with is to test a business model that is technically feasible, that is that you actually can actually come up with a solution. Like just now the team probably say that I think we can come up with a home use device that is 50,000. Other people cost 100,000. I think 50,000 people may be willing to pay for it. But can you actually make it work at $50,000? Can you actually halve the cost of what other people incur? It may not be technically feasible. So you jolly well first establish that if that's your value proposition, to make it half the price of your competitor, you jolly make sure that you can actually do it technically feasibly, make something that works at half the price, at half the cost. If you don't have that technology, then this is just a pipe dream, right? You know the customer wants it cheap, but can you deliver, right? So that's the first thing, right? Technical feasibility. Second thing is about being financially profitable, right? Our friend with this wonderful portable motor that can be attached to any bicycle, it is something that obviously delivers certain value, right? But how much people are willing to pay for it? And are they willing to pay for it at a price that's high enough for you to make money? And make money not just in the sense that your bill of material to make the product, but you think through the whole supply chain. I have this physical product, how do I get this product to the end customer? I may have to sell through some wholesaler, some retailer, maybe I have to pay someone to help install, I don't know, right? And you take into account all the costs that will be taken out. Very often when you sell consumer product, the end price that the end user actually pay will probably be 3-4 times the actual physical bill of material manufacturing cost. Okay? So then you need to figure out after you work back all this that is there enough profit margin left for you? If not, can you figure out a better business model to reach the customers? So let's say, for example, right, it could be that since now there are all these bike sharing company, right, Mobike, Obike and all that. Maybe instead of a B2C model where I try to sell this directly to the end, bicycle user, why not I partner with I convince one of these bike sharing company, that they provide it as an option. And because they have huge channel of distributions, maybe they have even economy of scale to do this. If you can have one of them, maybe that may help you dramatically reduce the cost of getting this into the hand of the consumer, for example, right? So these will be things that you need to ask yourself how to make it financially profitable, right? So what you're going to do, and we have asked you all to have done this before we start, is to start with a blank canvas, write down all your assumptions, as I mentioned, some of it you are pretty sure, some of it you are not sure, some of it is wild guesses, and some of it you probably have to leave blank because you don't know what it is. It's okay, right? Start with that and then go out and find out and check if any of your assumption is correct. If not, change it. And anything that you do not know, fill it up, right? Over time, that's how you learn, right? So the lean launch philosophy is to do this with as little investment as possible in the product development. Remember the Sapo case? Where possible, don't spend any money to develop your product yet. But of course, the reality is that for certain type of solution you want to provide, you probably need some prototype to demonstrate how it works. You probably need to have sufficient sort of investment in the facility to actually make it such that people can give you realistic feedback. Yeah? But as I will emphasize, the whole purpose of this is to focus on, in the first instance, whether there is a real demand, whether there are real customer problem that you're solving. And for that part, is typically the most important before anything else. That's why for the purpose of this lean launch, we always ask you to start on the right-hand side, right, of a business model canvas. Right-hand side is that who is your customer, what value we can deliver to them, and through what channels I can actually have this product or service delivered to the customer, and how do I find this customer in the first place? Sorry, how do I find the customer in the first place? So, for example, our friend have this wonderful, portable motor. It's working. It's working. It's well. Now, how do you let the world knows that this thing is available and where they can get it, right? So that's customer relationship, right? Customer relationship has to do with how do you get and keep your customer. In many cases, this can be expensive because just to let people know that your product exists costs money, right? You put up advertisement, you hire direct salesmen to go and tell people about our product, to demonstrate. All this costs money, right? So you need to figure out what is a efficient way to get this to your information to the customer. And then once they are interested, they want to buy, you have an efficient way to actually deliver this product to them, right? So that's the right-hand side. And of course, the reason you're doing all this is that it hopefully generates revenue. And then you have to figure out, therefore, what is the best way that I charge my customer? Do I rent it out? Maybe they don't have to buy. Maybe what if I have a whole sort of suite of a shop, 7-Eleven. If I need it, I go there and borrow it and use it and I return it another 7-Eleven. I don't know, right? So the idea is that there could be issues about how you generate the revenue. Maybe is it rental model? Is it selling the equipment? Is it providing a service? So all these are your assumptions about how you make money in doing this part. So you validate this part of the business model first. After you figure out essentially how you do it, then the next thing you ask yourself, now how do I actually make this portable motor? How do I make it such that it is as low cost as possible? And how do I make it in such a way that it is of sufficiently high quality? And how can I prevent other people from just copying it? Is there some intellectual property I can protect and so on? And do you need to do everything yourself? Maybe you can outsource the manufacturing to others. Maybe you can outsource some of the key parts and components to others. Maybe the technical support, the maintenance, the charging, maybe this can be done by other partner, right? So this, you need to figure out the left-hand side. But usually there's no point is to look at the left-hand side until you are pretty sure that you have a right-hand side. Because if the customer say we are not interested in this product, then it doesn't matter how much you make it cheaper. Because the customer may not be interested at all, right? And all this, of course, will be tested in terms of how much cost you're going to create. So you're going to go through iterations. You start with some initial assumption of how you can make money, how much it's going to cost you to actually make it, and hopefully the revenue bigger than the cost. If it's not, you don't have a business, so you got to go back on board and say, now can I simplify my product so that the cost is lower? And then maybe I have to start looking for a different market segment that don't need all the bells and whistles. I start all over again and see whether I come to a point where revenue bigger than cost, right? So this is the basic idea and an iterative process. Each time you start out with some assumption, test and validate, and go back to the drawing board if need be, right? Now, I was going to use this as an example to illustrate the concept of a business model. Yeah, can you help me? Sorry. Yeah. Now, all of you have heard of Nespresso, right? The coffee machine with a pot, right? So this is a reasonably good assumption about how you use the business model as a way to illustrate what it is that you're doing. Yeah?
My name is Alex Osterwalder. I'm the lead author of Business Model Generation and co-founder of Strategizer.com. I'm going to walk you through the business model of Nespresso, a company that sells coffee in the espresso business. So let's look at the value proposition first. It's composed of two products, the Nespresso machine and the pods that go with it. And we're going to look at the distribution strategy that Nespresso has. They sell the machines through retail to households, which means they earn a one-time transactional sales from selling the machines. Most of that money goes to the key partners, the machine manufacturers, who they work together with. Then for the Nespresso pods, they have a totally different distribution strategy. They only sell the pods through their own channels. Started out with mail order and call center, then they built Nespresso.com, and today in the biggest cities of the world, you'll find Nespresso stores as well. This is interesting because it meant that they had to build distribution channels as a key resource in their business model, because this is the first time that a Nestlé-owned company sells directly to households. Now, why do they use different distribution channels for the machines and the pods? Well, they use retail because it has the broadest reach possible, because they want to get the machines into your household. Once you have it in your house, you're actually locked in because you can only use Nespresso pods. That's so-called switching costs, which prevent you from going to another machine manufacturer. And they defend that through the patents that they have in the key resources. And some of those patents actually expired last year, which means they need to renew their business model to a certain extent. Now, once you have the machine and you're locked in, you're going to have to buy pods from Nespresso, which means they earn money from repetitive pod sales. They create so-called recurring revenues. They change an entire industry from moving it from a transactional business to a repetitive business with recurring revenues. So interestingly here, they have recurring revenues, they have direct sales with higher margins, and they ask you for 5 to 6 times more for the coffee that you pay. So they get people around the world to pay much more money for the same amount of coffee. Now let's look at the left-hand side of the business model canvas to see what they need to have to do what they plan to do on the right-hand side. First of all, they need coffee. So they work together with coffee growers, and they try to source some of the best coffee in the world, which they put in the pods. And the pods is something that they manufacture themselves. So production of the pods is an important key activity, and they have production facilities to do that. They churn out 12 billion pods every year, which is one of their main costs. Another important activity and key resource and main cost is marketing and branding. Obviously, when you're in consumer goods, you need to put a lot of money into that. And the last piece here that's interesting is that because they sell directly to households, a decision made on the right-hand side of the canvas, they had to build up business-to-consumer distribution logistics, which we find on the left-hand side of the canvas. So now we have everything that's important for the success of Nespresso on one piece of paper. And interestingly, when Nespresso started out, they had a totally different business model around exactly the same product, and that almost went bankrupt. So it's only after a couple of iterations of the business model that they were able to find the business model that you see on this piece of paper and that led to a multi-billion-dollar business. So the difference was not the product alone. The difference were all the pieces here on the business model canvas that led to the success of Nespresso.
Right, so this is an example where, if I sort of rephrase what he said, the difference is not in the technology alone, the difference is also in the business model, right? And also, I guess the way they have animated it shows you that is the way you actually use your business model canvas. you start from right-hand side and then you start moving on the relevant thing that you need to do in order to support what you have assumed on the right-hand side. And where possible, you use different color code to help you identify different things that you're doing. So for example, it could be that you have 2 or 3 different customer segments, and for these 2 or 3 customer segments, you need to do things differently. So now you use different color code to show which part of the left-hand side and which part of the channel you use for which customer segment, for example, right? So this sort of simple example hopefully illustrates to you how you yourself will use the business model to communicate to others what you have in mind. Because bear in mind that business model canvas is a tool for you yourself to clarify your own thoughts, but it's also a way for you to communicate to others in a clear manner what is it that you are doing that is innovative or different from existing. Now we will get into discussion also about, can you satisfy the need of different customer segments with the same product, or do you need to have segment your product? I have product A to serve segment A, product B to serve segment B. These are the kind of discussions that you will need to have by doing this sort of initial customer market discovery and validation exercise. Yeah, right. So that tells you what you need to do. Yeah. And I mentioned that you need to also test each time about the technical feasibility and financial viability. It could be that you have a customer segment that has a very high technical performance requirements, and you realize that maybe your current technology can't meet that need yet. Maybe 3 years, 5 years down the road, when your technology is more mature, you can meet that need. That means that therefore they are not the right market segment for you now because of technical consideration. So there could be some market segment where they like your product, but they are not willing to pay much. And so it may not be financial. So maybe until you are able to reduce your cost sufficiently, then you can service them. But initially your cost is high. So maybe then you say, okay, let's find some other market segment, make some money first, then later I have time to do more R&D to reduce the cost until my cost is low enough, then I can meet this financial viability test. You get what I mean? So each time, when you look at each of the possible market segment for fit, you look at these criteria. Yeah. Right. So I will briefly say a little bit about what I mean by technical feasibility requirement. So there are 2 things you need to think about. One is the requirement by the customer. The customer say it must achieve this performance level. If not, I don't buy. Sometimes they tell you very clearly, right? Or you must, I'm only willing to pay at this price or something, right? So there's certain technical performance requirement. You must achieve certain sort of accuracy, you might achieve certain speed, certain throughput, or whatever it is with the case of the customer, right? So you have to make sure that you meet the performance requirement, minimum threshold for that customer. But there's a second set of requirement which is not by the customer but by regulations. In many products, especially in biomedical, for example, there is regulatory requirement, safety considerations. For example, in some cases they may say it must be you must get FDA approval. In some other cases, it's some CE mark approval or whatever. You must understand in each case what are the regulatory requirements, and you have to make sure that your solution meet that requirements. Because if you don't meet the regulatory requirement, it is actually illegal for you to actually sell the product, right? Even if the customer wants it, you can't sell it. Yeah. So it's important that you go out and find out what the regulatory requirements are. And sometimes the regulatory requirements depend on how you position your product, right? So in the biomedical area, you know that if you're trying to sell something as a drug, huge sort of requirement, phase 1, phase 2 trial. But you try to sell it as a health supplement. You're not pretending to be able to, cure some diseases. It's not a drug, it's a health supplement. Then the regulatory requirement becomes different. So now you have to decide which one you want to position yourself. There are pros and cons. Yeah. So the next thing is about your readiness level versus the requirement. I mean, obviously, right? You know this requirement, then you ask, where am I? Ideal is that you already met the requirement. Your performance already exceeded the requirement. Good news, right? But in some cases, it has not met yet but you are pretty confident based on your current knowledge of the technology that with a little bit more further development, you can meet it. You don't see any major technical barrier issue that will prevent you from meeting it. Although it has not met yet, but you're confident that with some further work, in other words, the risk is quite low that you'll be able to achieve it, right? So ideally, you have to be in these two positions, because if you are not, then you are not ready to talk about commercialization. Then you have to really go back and do your R&D first, right? Do more R&D until you get it. And that's why, for the purpose of this segment, we say that you should be at TRL of at least 3 to 4, right? Because if you are not at 3 to 4, you are not ready to talk about this, yeah? And the last point, of course, is that to remind yourself that you need to check for each performance dimensions. Because every technology has different performance dimension. Let's think about a data storage device. The performance dimension has to be with what is the storage space, what is the speed, and what is the reliability, right? You may perform better than existing technology in terms of storage space, but it may not be so reliable. So you need to make sure that you look at the requirement in every possible performance dimensions, yeah? Right, so we talk about the technology readiness level as a rough guideline for us to sort of examine whether you are ready to talk about commercialization. Yeah? In a way, if you are already 8 or 9, it's wonderful, but then you already incur so much cost, because as you go further up, it's more and more costly. So technically, if you are 8 and 9, there's nothing much we can do to help you, because even if you discover there's a new market segment, you already incur all these costs. The whole purpose of this is to help you save this cost. So you don't spend money to do unnecessary development here until you are really sure that this actually is hitting the target segment. Yeah? So that's why we say the best position for you should be here. Although we don't reject you if you are here. It's just that we can't help you save the cost that you already incurred to get you up to here. Yeah? Okay, so financial viability, the basic simple rule of thumb that you may want to work at this stage is just the basic point about that the net margin per unit sold must be bigger than 0. I mean, financial analysis can be complicated, and if you do decide to go ahead and launch a startup or do whatever, you obviously have to go through more proper financial analysis and all that. So this 10-week won't be enough time for you to go into it in detail. What you do is a very high-level ballpark assessment of the financial viability, and the basic idea is just 2 points. One is that the customer are willing to pay per unit revenue that is higher than the unit cost of making that one product. So if it costs you $5 to make and deliver the product to the customer must be willing to pay you more than $5. Now, how much is it? If the customer pay you $10, the unit margin will be $5. Now, this doesn't take into account all your original fixed costs and other costs you need to incur before you can even make a single product, right? You have to do your R&D, you have to get your things certified, approved. All these are upfront costs. These upfront costs is initial fixed cost. I'm talking about the unit marginal cost. For every extra unit I sell, how much it costs me and how much they pay back. The unit margin sold, first of all, must be positive. If it's not, you don't really have a viable business. Now, of course, you can think about some other business model where you are hoping to maybe create sufficient user base, critical mass, you dominate, and then later you sell eyeballs or whatever. But we can talk about those later refinement. But the basic thing ought to be that for every unit you sell, you're able to generate a margin. This margin, of course, might be bigger than 0. Then the next thing you ask is that what is the minimum break-even volume? The minimum break-even volume essentially says that before you can sell a single unit, you must incur upfront costs. Let's say how much is the upfront cost? The R&D, the certification, setting up the actual manufacturing plant. Let's say they cost you $10 million. And if every unit you sell, let's say the net margin is $10, how many units must you sell before you can recover your initial cost? Right? One unit, you make $10 net. Your initial cost, all the fixed cost R&D is $1 million. So how many units must you sell? 100,000 units, right? Or is it, no, sorry, if it's $10, you have to sell actually 1 million units in order to make 10 million, right? I say 10 million, right? I forgot. Right? So you know that therefore you must be able to sell 1 million units just to recover your initial upfront fixed cost. And hopefully after that, any unit you sell now, you begin to make money. Meaning, this minimum break-even volume has to be hopefully much, much smaller than the total market size. Because if the total number of people who will buy a unit is less than your minimum break-even volume, you never ever going to make any money, right? You never make back the fixed cost that you incur. That means that this is not a viable business. It's impossible for you to make money. And the much, much bigger this is than this, it shows you that there are room to grow and make money, right? Just a simple back of the envelope kind of calculations. Based on this, and you can actually, and based on your known fixed cost, you can calculate the minimum break-even volume, back of the envelope, roughly. And then the next thing you ask is that, how big is the market size and address? Now, it is possible that you can have business where the market size is not very big, but this is huge. For every let's say you are selling an expensive, let's say, I don't know, your home-based physiotherapy system, For every unit you sell, let's say they pay you 50,000 and your real cost is only 10,000. You're making 40,000 per unit. So in this case, you don't have to sell that many units before you can recover your upfront costs, right? So one way in which your business can be viable is that you have huge margin, even though the total margin is not so big. Second is that your margin is tiny, but the market is huge, huge, huge. Even if I make 1 cent from every customer, if there are millions and millions of customers, I will still be able to make money, right? So you have to first decide what kind of business you are in. Are you in business where you have high margin, or you are in a market where low margin but huge market? Okay, so that's the first thing to confirm is that this condition is true. Again, back of the envelope without doing too much detail. Yeah, you can apply some heuristic rule. So you know, for example, you estimate what is your bill of material cost, and you know roughly that in this kind of business, what is the value chain they will take up. The wholesaler how much markup they make, the retailer how much market they make, the allowance for inventory cost how much it is. All that allow you to blow up to what is your your unit cost. Yeah. Okay, so you can do a back of envelope calculation. The second thing you need to do is also about scalability. That is the nature of your technology, your business model, such that as you double the number of customers that you serve, would your cost be also doubling? If revenue double, your cost double, it's not a scalable business, right? So ideally, you want to have a situation where you have scalability, meaning that I sell to more customers, my cost doesn't go up linearly. My cost is, if customer double, my cost only increase by 10% or 5%, whatever. That's the ideal business. And if you think about it, essentially the main business that have this characteristic is when your core technology is intellectual property, that it does not, let's say software, for example, the software, my cost to duplicate another software is negligible, right? I sell one software, the cost to sell one software and 2 software is almost the same, because the cost to make a software, a copy of a software, right, is very low once I have developed the code and debug and so on, right? So that is an ideal business where you have intangible intellectual property where the cost doesn't scale up linearly as you scale up your productions. Whereas physical costs, like if it's a consulting business, you want to double the volume of consulting, you got to hire twice the number of consultants. That is not a scalable business. Yeah? But if you can capture some of the knowledge of the consultant in some database, you capture it in some AI system, then you can service more clients, and yet you don't have to multiply your consulting costs. Yeah. So you think about the nature of the business. The more scalable it is, the better. Yeah. Right. So essentially, you realize that for most businesses, initially you incur upfront costs, and only later on you start to sell, you create a margin, and eventually this will help overcome your initial fixed cost. Right. Okay. So just to summarize, then what we've said, the whole lean launch process is you start with a blank sheet of BMC, write down all your assumptions, which is what most of you have done, right? Which is you fill it up. Some of these are wild guesses. Some are things that you are not sure about. Then you will spend the next 10 weeks, go out and talk to potential customer, partner, vendors, whoever that is relevant that you have assumed here to see if your assumption about that you have written down here is validated or not. If it's not, you cross it out, and then you replace it with some new assumptions. Now, we say this is a customer discovery and market validation, meaning that you are not just going to validate your current hypothesis, but one of the things we want you to do is to go out to discover new hypotheses, things that you did not know is important. Yeah? So let me give you one example, right? This is, was told to me by a friend of mine who used to work for Procter & Gamble shampoo, lady shampoo division, right? The headquarters is in the US. They thought that, Asia is a growth market, in particular China is a growth market. And they thought that maybe one of the key things they need to do differently in Asia, in China, different from the US, is that, well, one thing about shampoo is about the fragrance, right? The fragrance. And they kind of know that Chinese probably have a different set of fragrant taste from that of the Americans or Europeans. So they say, therefore, the research project is to go to China and try and find out what fragrances would the Chinese like that are different from the European, right? And so that was their initial hypothesis. There are some hypotheses that maybe, I don't know, lavender or whatever fragrance may be better, right? But anyway, they think that what they're going out is to find out about which fragrance Chinese women like. Interestingly, when they get down to China, they went to a rural villages and they were going to actually do some get out of the building, right? They go and find out. And then within the first half an hour, they realize that may not be the most important question to ask. What they found out is that the rural women have very little clean water, and they have to wash their hair with a small amount of clean water. It's something that they never knew before. In other words, when you go out and talk, you will find out that there are hypotheses that you never realized. So as a result of this observation, they realized the new hypothesis is, how can we produce shampoo that uses a small amount of clean water? That becomes the new interesting challenge, because if you can solve this problem well, you will create a lot more demand, because small amount of clean water is never a problem in advanced market, right? But this is a problem. So therefore, when we say you go out, it's not just validating what you know, it's also to discover what you don't know. In other words, a lot of time, you don't know what you don't know, right? That's the problem. So the purpose of going out is to find out what is it that you don't know that could be of relevant interest to you. So in this case, they discovered that actually, amount of water, clean water for washing shampoo is an important customer problem that you didn't realize before, because when you are sitting in the headquarters research lab in Boston, you never realize that there's a problem. And that's why the importance of getting out of the building. Go to really observe and see for yourself what is the real problem. Maybe the problem you think they have, it is still a problem. I'm sure that if they go and do the survey with the Chinese, they'll find out the Chinese give them a different set of fragrance preference. So it's not that problem is not important. It's just that you discover there are other even more important problems. And maybe, that may be a better solution for your technology than to just solve this problem. So that's why tomorrow we talk more about your interview techniques and all that. And keep in mind that one of your big challenges is that very often you end up with leading questions. If you ask people, is this a problem? Usually they will say it's a problem. But do you know that this is only the number 10 problem they have? They have 9 other problems, even more important. But because you never ask, they never tell you. So when you say, is it a problem? Yeah, it's a problem. But they will not spend money on this until they solve the other 9 problems first. And then you will be wondering why they tell me it's a problem, but they're not willing to pay. Because top of their mind is the other 9 problems first. Your job is to actually figure out what is the top of the mind problem. And where does your problem stand in that list of top of the mind problem? Because you know that every customer has a limited budget. They put their money to prioritize on their most important problem. If what you have is a nice to have, not the most important, they will treat it with a low priority. Yeah? Okay, so this is the reason why we say it's always about discovery as well as validation. And discovery, you can never discover by asking a structured questionnaire. And that's why we advocate going out face-to-face. And if you cannot do face-to-face, at least through Skype and talk and so on. Because from the body language, from the tone, you can actually tell whether they're interested or not interested. And more importantly, because you're face-to-face, you have a chance to actually ask them new questions that you never thought of. Because from the impression, from the side remark they make and so on. In a structured questionnaire, you can only validate your known hypothesis, your known problem. You can never discover new problem. Your job is to discover what are the total set of problems that your customer face that may be relevant interest to you. Yeah? So we will keep hammering this point to you that when you go out to the interview, one of the things you must come back with is insights. In other words, discover things that you didn't know that you didn't know. Yeah? And so this is and those discoveries will lead you to new hypotheses, new hypotheses to be tested. Yeah? And so you go through a sort of iterative process, start with a hypothesis, you decide which are the things that, when you say design experiment, means what question to ask and what assumption to give them. For example, you can say that to one team, you can say, oh, this product, I think, has this feature A and B, and the other with features B and C, and see which one people respond more to, right? So the idea is that you can vary what you go out to ask. That's why we mean experiment. Yeah? You need not ask everybody the identical set of questions. You need not show them the identical prototype demo. You need not tell them that all of them will be priced at this amount of money. You test them out and see what they prefer. Yeah? And based on this, you come back with the insights and you come back with a certain validation, and then you sort of iterate. Yeah? So just to re-summarize, start with writing down the hypothesis and write them down as specifically as possible. Right? So that you can actually go and validate. Try not to write a motherhood statement, yeah, because motherhood statement doesn't get you down to what you want to get at, yeah. So once you have the hypothesis, the first thing is to test if the customer user have the problem you imagine them to have. Never thought about your solution. First, find out if they have the problem you imagine they have. It's not about your solution. It's about the problem that the customer has. Only after you validated that they have the problem that you think they have, then only the next step is to ask whether they like your solution. First, if they don't have the problem you imagine they have, there's no point to talk about your solution, right? Because they don't need your solution, they don't have the problem. But assuming you got lucky, they really have the problem you imagine they have, they may still not like your solution, which is the second part to test. Do they like this solution? Why don't they like your solution? Maybe there's some other problem that you didn't realize, And only after both are validated, then you can be confident to go ahead. Now, if they don't have this, then you got to go back and see, you know, are there some other problem that I can help solve? Yeah? And you iterate until you find, and if you find that you can't really, they have a problem, that they don't like your solution, then what do you have to do? You have to do what is called a pivot. That means you have to make a major change. A pivot is a major radical change to your business model assumptions. It could be a change in customer segment. So instead of trying to sell to this customer segment, let's try to a different customer segment. Yeah. So I think 2 years ago, we had a team in our in one of the team. They had a solution that at first they thought they can help the client to speed up their internet speed. They thought that was their technology. But when they go out and talk, they find that actually that's not the main problem. The main problem they had was that they want it to be more secure, more security. Yeah? So they discovered that actually their technology can also be used to improve security. So in the process, therefore, they pivoted. Instead of trying to say, I'm providing a solution to speed up your whatever access, now they reposition to help you make it more secure, right? So you could pivot by offering a different solution, more or less hopefully some minor change to your technology, or you go to a completely different market segments. You forget about that segment, you go after another market segment. Yeah. So we had a team some years back that the professor has advanced material. He was pretty sure that the application is in construction industry. And actually he has spent years trying to commercialize to the construction industry. But every time they told him, yeah, I like your material, but it's too expensive. You know, in construction industry, right, we use huge amount of this, you know, it has to be low cost. If you can reduce the cost, we'll buy. And he had been doing it for years and still haven't achieved the cost target. I think through our program, almost by accident, we introduced him to an orthopedic surgeon. And within an hour, the orthopedic surgeon kind of told him that actually your material has good application as an orthopedic material. Because one of the main things is he has some fungal or some other properties. Yeah. So it tells you that therefore, you may actually, your product market fit may not be with the initial customer segment you have imagined, and you have to pivot totally. But once you're now talking about selling to the orthopedic surgeon, it's a completely different ball game, right? Not construction industry. You don't deal with contractor. You don't deal with the supplier. You deal with now a whole set of different value chain, different set of assumptions. How do you actually sell to an orthodontist? You have to get regulatory approval, a whole set of issues that come that never arises in the previous model, right? That is an example of a major pivot. And you discover sometime that you need to make this major pivot because your current assumption just doesn't work or it's not ready yet. In his case, is that the cost is too high for them to actually be usable in their original target industry. It's not that it cannot be used, it's just that too expensive, right? Because that market segment has a very different perception about value. But the orthodontists are willing to pay a lot more, but of course then they have a new set of requirements. Yeah? So now you need to think about how you find which is the right product market fit. Okay, I hope that sort of give you a good feel. Just to summarize then, the way we run this is that aside from today, where you are someone like me who talk a lot, in future, every session is you who do all the talking. You come out and talk, and we will ask you questions, give you feedback, give you suggestions. And so that's the meaning of flipped classroom, right? You do all the reading outside, all the preparation outside, do all the sort of interview, right? So the basic philosophy, action learning, that the only way you can sort of present is that you have to first say what you have done in the week. What have I done? How many people you have interviewed? You must write that up front. You'll be guaranteed that you never write down that. You'll be chased, you'll be hounded. Yeah? How many interviews you have done? You interview who? Right? So what exactly you have done that week? The next thing you then say is that what have I learned? Okay, what have I learned from all these interviews? What is it that I knew now that I didn't know before? Yeah, I didn't know before. And the third thing is that what do you plan to do next? And what help do I need? So every week you come back and report these 3 things. What have I done during the week? What have I learned? And what do I plan to do next? And what help do I need? And then you continue going out and do this and come back and report again. Okay? Right? And the agile learning idea here is that you want to have rapid feedback and decision on what to do next. Because you want to optimize, prioritize what you want to focus on doing. Yeah? As I mentioned that initially you may start with doing a wider search, research, talk to as many possible customer segments as possible, quickly eliminate those that doesn't seem to be relevant so that you can zoom in on 1 or 2. But try not to zoom in immediately on this 1 or 2 because you may be missing out on all these others. So our professor who was zoomed in from day 1 into construction, in fact, he had been doing it for years. Maybe if he had actually widened his search, he would have realized that maybe I should have spent more in trying to make it in for the orthodontist. So you miss out whole market segments because you were so focused on some, right? So try not to go to that search without doing a proper scan, a width search. Yeah? For all you know, the market that is best fitted to you may not be the one that you focus on. Like in this case, construction industry. The dilemma is that it's not wrong, It's not wrong that they are a market. It's just that it doesn't have the best fit. Yeah. And what we get you to do through this program is that you always need to document whatever you learn. So we have a learning management system, Glider, that you will upload as soon as you have finished the interview. And the good thing about the learning management system is that everyone, your mentors and us, will know exactly when you upload it. Okay? So if you haven't done anything, we know that you haven't done anything. Okay? If you have not uploaded, we assume that you haven't done anything. Right? Okay? So they'll be hounding you, right? Why have you done this? And also every week, we put you on parade to compare, If other people have done 10, you have done only 2, you kind of know, where you stand, yeah? But the more important thing is that a lot of us have an imperfect and biased memory recall. We always reinterpret, what happened before. So that's why it's very important that you actually document as your thinking evolves. And that's why the learning management system allows you to put in your business model canvas in the first week, second week, how it changed, so that at the end of 10 weeks, you can see how your own thinking has evolved. So the guiding rule is that you never delete anything. You sort of kind of cross it out to say that you have changed, but the original idea is still in the business model canvas. It's just that it shows that it's been invalidated. It never erased, right? So that you have a good record tracking of everything that you have thought of over time. And that's very good for you to think through lessons that you learn. And it's also good for you to sort of convey this to others and teach others. Yeah, right. So we will be Kevin and Susan will be keep reminding you that hey, you haven't done your documentation. And when we say documentation, it's not just quantity but also quality, because we want you to really record all the observations that you have done. And one of the key things we'll talk about tomorrow is how to avoid various sort of problem. A standard problem is that people like to hear what they like to hear, and conveniently didn't hear things that they're not good. Yeah, so therefore it's very biased, and we want to make sure that this is minimized. Yeah. The other main part is peer sharing and learning. We make you to present in your track so that everybody else in the same track, biomedical or engineering, they will give you feedback. And the spirit is that you try to help each other to learn, because when it comes your time to present, you want feedback from others. So you should also share your feedback to others. And because you belong to the same track, often there are some similarities. There may be even potentially the same customer segment to be guy to be interviewed, and you can share that contact and so on. Yeah. So this is where we will sort of emphasize active participations. Yeah. In fact, the learning management system itself also allows you to give comments to other teams in your track. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to walk through today and part of tomorrow about 4 analytic tools that we will encourage you to use to help you do this search and discovery and validation better. We already talked briefly about business model canvas, which you already started to use. I'm going to start talking about a tool called value proposition canvas to help you clarify your assumption about what the customer problems are and how you're going to solve the customer problem. We also then will recommend a tool called whole product map or whole product canvas to really help you concretize how those customer value that you think you're going to deliver can actually be done through specific product functionalities. Because at the end of the day, it has to be translated into something you can actually build. Yeah? And lastly, we want to make you to go through an exercise of competitive differentiations. Now, throughout today, and maybe part of tomorrow, I will use one common example to get you to start working on them as a group to see that you can actually apply this. And I want to pick an example that hopefully everyone are familiar with. And so I decided the example would be essentially whether it's the Uber, Grab innovation. The advantage, I think, is that in this case, all of you understand that, right? So I'm going to have you walk through today, and you have to work in groups to try and define what is the business model for Grab, Uber, what is the value proposition they create, who are the customers, and what does the whole product map look like for them to be able to really satisfy the customer, and lastly, how do they differentiate themselves from others, so that you can see how this tool can be applied before you apply it to your own. Yeah? Okay?